All right, we have more changes unfolding in the world of global politics, and more specifically, down in the country of Argentina. Changes that saw a stunning and quite refreshing turn of events just play out as Javier Milei won the runoff election and will be sworn in as the new president of Argentina in a few weeks. Something that has just opened the door to a number of radical opportunities, the type of opportunities that are few and far between, especially here in the States. Look, high volatility comes high opportunity. So we're going to look at who Javier Milei really is, why it's so important that he just won, important not just for his country, but for ours as well, what this means for the dollar and for bond yields, and why this could shape the 2024 elections around the world. Because if you're not aware, there is a wave of presidential elections barreling down next year, and why what he's promising to do in Argentina, economically speaking, hopefully could spill over. His ideas spill over to our country, as some of them are exactly what we need here in the US. But before we get started, press the like button and consider subscribing. It helps the channel out, and I appreciate your support. So Argentina, folks, a country that's on track to see its sixth recession in just the last 10 years, run for decades by these far-left populist leaders that have run the country, economically speaking, into the ground. Look, we're talking a country at a critical inflection point right now. Inflation rivaling Venezuela, and if you think we have it bad here in the States, Argentina is running 140% plus annual inflation rate, only behind Venezuela, Zimbabwe, and Sudan, brought on by decades of far-left populist policies. And when I say far left, think old school left mixed in with America's social justice left, the worst of both worlds. Think like AOC and Bernie Sanders mixed together with actual backbone. Basically, what we used to consider far left in this country is what Argentina has had now for decades. Excessive spending fueled by constant stimulus programs with no broad or overarching plan, just spending package after spending package marketed for helping the people, and all paid for by borrowing. So what changed? Well, the election that just happened is what changed. Javier Milei is what just changed. The libertarian and political outsider pulled off a decisive victory, winning nearly 56% of the votes. This guy, Milei, 53, an economist and a libertarian, someone who's been vilified, as being far right and extreme, but has exploded in popularity, especially among young voters in Argentina. A pro-American president as well. Let me just give you a sense of who this guy is. Take a listen to him here in an interview from a few months ago. Take a listen to this.
Ahí, digamos, es necesario un fuerte compromiso de todos los creadores de riqueza para luchar contra el socialismo, contra el estatismo, y entender que si eso no se hace, los socialistas siempre van a seguir intentando. Porque, ¿cuál es el punto? Como ellos intentan vivir de los demás sin trabajar, ellos son incansables en buscar esto. Porque su leitmotiv en la vida es vivir de los otros. Entonces ellos no ceden nunca en este mecanismo de apropiación de la riqueza y del dinero o de la generación de ingresos de otro. Entonces esa batalla tiene que ser dada de manera permanente. No se puede descansar, porque cuando uno descansa, el socialismo avanza.
Now, we'll get into what he's planning to change in a minute, because you're going to want to hear this, trust me. But first, just take a look at what he's facing as the new president. Look at this. Record high inflation. Argentina's running an annual inflation rate of 140% plus. That's headline inflation. Core inflation, even higher. Light red line on this chart shows core inflation, core annual inflation, over 150%. Look, they have real and immediate problems down there. Inflation, worst problem a country can face. It leads to all sorts of issues, but most importantly, always leads to unrest. People freaking out, revolting, and in this case, it's justified. Realize if you live in Argentina today, every single month the value of your money is falling by 15%. Every month. What you can buy with your money shrinks by 15% per month. It's insane. Here's what Goldman Sachs says about how bad it is, how imminent the danger is. They write this in a November 17th note. Regardless of the election winner, we believe that a swift change in economic policies is imperative. The accumulated imbalances in the economy have grown too large and must be addressed promptly. We expect the economy to contract for the second year in a row in 2024. Annual inflation is tracking at close to 150% and is expected to continue to rise in the coming months. The exchange rate is overvalued. International reserves are at critical levels. Net reserves are significantly negative, around negative 11 billion US on our estimates. All in, we are of the view that if policymakers don't steer macro policy in a more orthodox direction, the macro adjustment could impose itself sooner or later, bringing a loss of control of the process and even higher social and economic costs, meaning the country collapses basically. So what did the people of Argentina do? They elected Javier Milei, the one man with a plan that he says may actually work. Now, how do you fix this? Well, take a listen to Javier Milei yourself. Here he is.
Bueno, lo primero que tenemos que entender es que el Estado no es la solución. El Estado es el problema. Ustedes, si se fijan acá, tienen la gran raviolada que es el Estado, el gran curro y la fuente de la decadencia argentina, que es el Estado. Esta es la foto del Estado que tenemos hoy. Si nos movemos hacia aquella pizarra, Ministerio de Turismo y Deporte, afuera. Ministerio de Cultura, afuera. Ministerio de Ambiente y Desarrollo Sostenible, afuera. Ministerio de las Mujeres y Género y Diversidad, afuera. Ministerio de Obras Públicas, afuera. Aunque te resistas. Vamos a seguir por acá. Ministerio de Ciencia y Tecnología e Innovación. Nada bueno salió del sector público. ¡Afuera! Ministerio de Trabajo, Empleo y Seguridad Social. ¡Afuera! Ministerio de Educación. Adoctrinamiento. ¡Afuera! Ministerio de Transporte. ¡Afuera! Ministerio de Salud. ¡Afuera! Ministerio de Desarrollo Social. ¡Afuera! ¿Cómo queda el Estado? Ministerio de Capital Humano, Ministerio de Infraestructura, Ministerio de Economía, Ministerio de Justicia, Ministerio de Seguridad, Ministerio de Defensa, Ministerio de Relaciones Exteriores y Ministerio del Interior. Se acabó el curro de la política. ¡Viva la libertad, carajo!
So look, he's a character, but he's smart, and I don't know about you, but gutting the federal government sounds like a pretty good start. In fact, it's the same thing that we need to do in this country. And remember, the voters elected him to do this. Here are the policy changes that he's planning on making, what he promised to do if elected. All right, first, return to an annual fiscal surplus, which means eliminate the deficit. Stop spending more than what you earn each year. Dollarization. Convert all the Argentine pesos to dollars and pass legislation to make the dollar legal tender and shut down the central bank. Now, that last one you gotta love. Any candidate that runs on closing your country's central bank is a winner in my book, and there's more, but these are like the big three items and what's important and have already begun to cause volatility in markets, more specifically in bond markets. Just for a minute, consider something. We talk about yields rising here in the States, right? How you can earn 5% per year on U.S. Treasuries. Well, what kind of yield do you think you would earn by investing in Argentina's sovereign debt? Basically like their government bonds, right? If you buy government bonds there, what's the yield? Well, take a look at this. And it's something, by the way, that trading desks have started homing in on these past few days. I have research paper after research paper popping up looking at ways to make this work. The Argentine 7-year bond yield currently sits at 49%. If you lend Javier Milei's government your money for 7 years, you're going to get almost a 50% annual return. 50% for sovereign debt's pretty wild. Right now, that's where the yield's been, by the way, prior to him winning the election. Also, in his victory speech 2 nights ago, he promised that his government's going to pay back their debts, he says. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The tricky part about this is if you think their debt will fall even further, just realize buying Argentine sovereign debt right now means you're doing it at a pre-Milei price. No one knows what's going to happen once he gets into office and begins to enact his policies. For example, these bonds could crash even further, sending yields even higher than where they are right now. So that's like the dilemma, right? That's what these big money investors are trying to unpack right now. What are the probabilities, the chances that that will happen? Or will his capitalistic policies send bond prices soaring? That's the question. Now, normally in this situation, you'd see the latter take place, a pro-capitalist president wanting to drastically cut spending, get their house in order, regain access to international markets, but some of his policies could upend the system. For example, his plan to dollarize, make the dollar his country's legal tender, make it their sole currency. Well, to do that, two things need to happen, right? They have to buy all the outstanding Argentine pesos out there and exchange them for dollars. Then their Congress has to pass legislation to officiate the US dollar as Argentina's legal currency. Now, the first part, buying all the outstanding pesos and exchanging them for dollars, Milei claims is going to have positive effects on the price of their bonds. But there's no way to know that, that's true, or if that's going to happen. The opposite could happen. We could see bond prices crash, not to mention he'd have to drastically devalue his currency to be able to afford it. So like always, higher reward comes higher risk, right? Now, aside from his dollarization plans and his massive spending cuts, he goes one step further. He ran on shutting down their central bank, canceling their central bank, something that I personally have no qualms about. All the Fed is, or central banks do, is yield control. That's what they do, right? A form of yield control, artificially set the rate in the market. How they do that, it's complicated through lending programs and the like, but they screw with the system, folks. That's the bottom line. They rig the system. The only reason that we're even in the mess that we are right now is because of the Federal Reserve. We wouldn't have this bubble of all bubbles that we've been living with now for years if the Fed didn't artificially set rates at like 0% and start quantitative easing a decade ago. So yeah, doing away with the Fed and central banks, I personally feel would be a great idea, something only one candidate has floated here in the US presidential election, that being Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, can Javier Milei implement all of this? I don't know. I'm not familiar with how their system works, but from the research that I've done, it looks like it'll be a bit difficult. His political party, for example, doesn't control their Congress like you see here. They're not even close to the majority in either chamber. So, I doubt it, but I like them regardless. All right, if you enjoyed this video, got something out of it, press the like button. If you didn't, that's all right too. Either way, I appreciate you watching.